Sarah Chen stepped off the double-decker bus at Buckingham Palace, her camera bouncing against her chest with each excited step. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard as tourists from around the world gathered behind the metal barriers. This was her first trip to London, a dream she had saved 3 years to make happen. She pulled out her phone and called her sister back in California. "Michelle, you won't believe how amazing this place is. The palace is huge, and there are so many people here already." Her voice carried the excitement of someone experiencing something magical for the first time. The crowd grew thicker as more visitors arrived. Sarah found herself squeezed between a family speaking German and an elderly couple from Australia. Everyone had their cameras ready, waiting for the famous changing of the guard ceremony that would begin in an hour. "Excuse me? Is this your first time here too?" asked a young man with a thick Irish accent. His name was Tommy, and he had driven down from Dublin just to see the guards. Sarah nodded enthusiastically, and soon they were chatting about their travel plans and sharing stories about the places they had visited. As they talked, Sarah noticed one of the royal guards standing perfectly still near the palace entrance. He wore the traditional red uniform with the tall black hat, and his face showed no expression at all. She had read about these guards online, how they were trained to remain completely motionless and not react to anything around them. "Look at him," she whispered to Tommy. "How does he stay so still? It must be incredibly difficult." Tommy shrugged and pointed out that the guard had been in that exact position for at least 20 minutes without moving even a finger. Sarah watched the guard with growing fascination. She wondered about the person underneath the uniform. Was he young or old? Did he have a family? What did he think about while standing there for hours? The questions filled her mind as she observed his perfect posture and unwavering gaze. Chatte. Morning air was crisp, and Sarah pulled her jacket tighter around herself. She had chosen to wear her favorite blue dress, the one her grandmother had given her before she passed away last year. It made her feel confident, and reminded her that this trip was something her grandmother had always wanted to do, but never got the chance. More tourists arrived, and the excitement in the crowd was building. Children pressed their faces against the barriers, trying to get a better view. Parents lifted little ones onto their shoulders. Street vendors sold British flags and postcards nearby, calling out their prices in cheerful voices. Sarah checked her watch. Still 40 minutes until the ceremony would begin. She decided to walk around the perimeter to get different angles for her photos. As she moved through the crowd, she kept glancing back at the motionless guard, still amazed by his discipline and dedication. A tour guide with a bright yellow umbrella gathered a group near Sarah. "These guards are not just for show," the guide explained to his group. "They are real soldiers who protect the royal family. They undergo months of training to learn how to stand perfectly still no matter what happens around them." Sarah listened carefully, learning that the guards were not allowed to smile, laugh, or even acknowledge the tourists. They had to pretend that the thousands of people taking their pictures simply did not exist. This made Sarah feel both impressed and a little sad for them. The sun climbed higher, warming the courtyard. Sarah found a good spot near the front of the crowd and settled in to wait. She practiced with her camera, adjusting the settings to make sure she would capture perfect photos of the ceremony. This was going to be the highlight of her entire trip. Tommy appeared beside her again, having bought a small British flag from one of the vendors. "Ready for the show?" he asked with a grin. Sarah nodded, her heart beating faster with anticipation. She had no idea that in just a few minutes she would become part of a story that would be talked about for years to come. The ceremony was about to begin when Sarah noticed something troubling. A small child, probably around 4 years old, had somehow slipped away from his parents and was now standing dangerously close to the road. Cars and buses moved steadily past the palace, and the little boy seemed confused and scared. Sarah looked around for the child's parents, but in the sea of faces and the noise of the crowd, it was impossible to tell who he belonged to. The boy had tears in his eyes and was taking small steps toward the busy street. Sarah's heart raced as she realized no one else seemed to notice the dangerous situation developing. Without thinking, Sarah ducked under the barrier and ran toward the child. "Hey there, sweetie," she called out softly, not wanting to frighten him more. "Are you looking for your mommy and daddy?" The boy nodded and pointed in different directions, clearly lost and overwhelmed. As Sarah gently took the child's hand and guided him away from the road, she found herself standing directly in front of the royal guard she had been watching earlier. For a moment, she forgot about everything else and looked up at his face, which remained as expressionless as before. "I'm sorry," she said to the guard, knowing he probably could not respond. "I just needed to help this little one." The child clung to her leg, still crying softly. Sarah felt protective of him and determined to reunite him with his family. Then something unexpected happened. The guard's eyes, which had been staring straight ahead, slowly moved down to look at the crying child. For just a second, Sarah saw something change in his expression. It was subtle, but she could swear she saw concern and kindness in his eyes. The crowd behind them was getting restless, with people pointing and whispering about the tourist who had broken the rules by crossing the barrier. Some were taking photos of Sarah and the guard, not knowing what was about to happen next. "Please," Sarah said quietly to the guard, "can you help me find his parents? I know you're not supposed to move, but this little boy is scared and lost." Her voice was gentle but urgent. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, but all she cared about was the child's safety. The guard remained still for another moment, and Sarah wondered if he had even heard her. Then, slowly and carefully, he took a small step forward. It was barely noticeable, but it was movement. The crowd gasped collectively, not believing what they were seeing. The guard bent down slightly, still maintaining his formal posture, and looked directly at the child. In a voice so quiet that only Sarah could hear, he whispered, "What's your name, little man?" The boy stopped crying for a moment, surprised to hear the statue-like figure speak. "Ben," the child whispered back, wiping his nose with his small hand. The guard nodded almost imperceptibly, and then, still speaking in that barely audible voice, asked, "Ben, what color shirt is your daddy wearing?" Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. This soldier, who was trained never to break character, was risking his career to help a lost child. She could see other guards watching from their positions, their faces showing concern for their colleague who was breaking the most important rule of their duty. "Blue shirt," Ben said, pointing back toward the crowd. "And Mommy has yellow hair, like the sun." The guard nodded again and then did something that made the entire crowd fall silent. He pointed, very subtly, toward a section of the crowd where a man in a blue shirt and a blonde woman were frantically looking around and calling out a name. Sarah immediately understood. "Come on, Ben," she said, taking his hand. "I think I see your parents." As she began to walk toward the area the guard had indicated, she turned back to look at him. He had already returned to his original position, staring straight ahead as if nothing had happened. But something had changed. The crowd was buzzing with excitement and disbelief. Camera flashes were going off everywhere as people tried to capture photos of the guard who had broken protocol to help a child. Sarah could hear voices in different languages, all expressing amazement at what they had just witnessed. As she walked through the crowd with Ben, Sarah felt a strange mix of emotions. She was happy to be helping the child, but she was also worried about the guard. Would he get in trouble for what he had done? Had she caused problems for him by putting him in this situation? "Mommy! Daddy!" Ben suddenly shouted, seeing his parents, pushing through the crowd toward them. The relief on their faces was overwhelming as they scooped up their son and thanked Sarah repeatedly. The father, wearing the blue shirt exactly as Ben had described, had tears in his eyes as he hugged his child. Word of what happened spread through the crowd like wildfire. People who had witnessed the guard's unexpected reaction began sharing the story with those who had missed it. Within minutes, everyone at Buckingham Palace was talking about the tourist, who had embraced the situation, and the guard who broke his silence to help a child. "Did you see that? He actually moved!" exclaimed an elderly woman from Scotland. She grabbed her husband's arm excitedly. "In 40 years of visiting London, I've never seen anything like it." Her husband nodded in agreement, still staring at the guard who had returned to his stoic position. Tommy found Sarah in the crowd after she had safely returned Ben to his grateful parents. "Sarah, you're famous," he said with a huge smile. "Everyone's talking about what you did, and that guard's reaction has people amazed. Look around. Half the crowd is still taking pictures of him." Sarah glanced back at the guard and felt a pang of worry. "I hope I didn't get him in trouble," she said softly. "He was just being kind to a scared child. That shouldn't be something he gets punished for." Tommy reassured her that anyone with sense would understand the guard did the right thing. A group of American tourists approached Sarah, eager to hear her version of what happened. "We were too far away to see clearly," said a woman with a Texas accent. "Did he really speak to the little boy? We heard he actually talked." Sarah nodded and briefly explained how the guard had quietly helped identify where Ben's parents might be found. Meanwhile, social media was exploding with posts about the incident. People who had been at the palace were uploading photos and videos to their accounts with captions like, "Royal Guard breaks silence for lost child," and "Humanity wins at Buckingham Palace today." The hashtag #ArchARoyalGuardHero began trending within an hour. A reporter from a local London newspaper, who happened to be in the area covering tourist stories, quickly approached Sarah for an interview. "I'm James Mitchell from the Evening Standard." He introduced himself. "Would you mind telling me what happened from your perspective? This is quite an unusual story." Sarah was hesitant at first, not wanting to cause more attention for the guard who might already be facing consequences. But James explained that positive stories like this one helped people remember the human side of these ceremonial positions. "These guards are real people with real hearts," he said. "Your story shows that." As they talked, James learned about Sarah's background, how she had saved for years to make this trip, how it was something her late grandmother had always dreamed of doing, and how she had acted purely on instinct to help a child in danger. The human interest angle of the story was perfect for his newspaper. The crowd continued to grow as news of the incident spread beyond just the people who were present. Tour groups that were supposed to move on to other locations lingered at the palace, hoping to catch another glimpse of the now famous guard. Street vendors reported their best sales day in months, as people wanted souvenirs to remember this special moment. Ben's parents, still grateful and emotional, found Sarah again before leaving with their son. "We don't know how to thank you enough," said Ben's mother, whose name was Linda. "When we realized Ben was missing, we were terrified. You saved him, and that guard helped reunite our family." Ben himself had calmed down completely and seemed fascinated by all the attention. He waved at the guard from a safe distance, and while the guard didn't wave back, Sarah could swear she saw the tiniest hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. Other guards on duty were maintaining their positions perfectly, but Sarah noticed them occasionally glancing toward their colleague. She wondered what they were thinking. Were they proud of him for showing compassion? Were they worried about potential consequences? Did they wish they could show their human side too? The changing of the guard ceremony eventually proceeded as scheduled, but it felt different somehow. The crowd watched with a new appreciation for these men who stood so perfectly still, knowing now that underneath those uniforms were people capable of great kindness and quick thinking. Photography enthusiasts in the crowd were having a field day. The combination of the traditional ceremony and the earlier human drama created perfect conditions for memorable pictures. Some photographers were focusing entirely on the guard who had helped, trying to capture any subtle changes in his expression. Family from Japan approached Sarah with their young daughter, who was about Ben's age. Through broken English and gestures, they conveyed their appreciation for what she had done. The little girl handed Sarah a small origami crane, a symbol of peace and good luck. Sarah was touched by the gesture and carefully tucked the paper, bird, into her jacket pocket. As the morning progressed, Sarah realized that this unexpected event had become the most meaningful part of her entire London trip. She had come to see the famous guards and take tourist photos, but instead she had witnessed and been part of something much more important, a moment when human compassion transcended rules and protocol. By afternoon, the story had reached major news outlets across Britain and beyond. Sarah found herself being contacted by radio stations, television programs, and online publications, all wanting to hear about her experience with the compassionate Royal Guard. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications and interview requests. The BBC contacted her first, followed by Sky News and several international networks. "This story is resonating with people around the world," explained a producer from Good Morning Britain. "It's exactly the kind of positive news that everyone needs to hear right now. Would you consider appearing on our show tomorrow?" Sarah felt overwhelmed by the attention, but also recognized the opportunity to share something meaningful. She agreed to a few interviews, hoping to emphasize how the guard's actions showed the best of human nature. "He could have ignored the situation completely," she told one reporter. "Instead, he chose to help a scared child, even though it meant breaking the most important rule of his job." Meanwhile, public opinion was rallying strongly behind the guard. Social media platforms were flooded with supportive messages from people around the world. The hashtag #DamatYour Royal Guard Hero continued to trend, with thousands of posts praising both Sarah's quick thinking and the guard's compassionate response. "This man is a true hero," wrote one Twitter user from Australia. "Rules are important, but protecting children is more important." Another post from Canada read, "I've visited London 3 times and always admired these guards. Now I respect them even more, knowing they're real people with big hearts." A petition was started online calling for the guard to be commended rather than punished for his actions. Within 6 hours, it had gathered over 50,000 signatures from people in dozens of countries. The petition description read, "This guard showed exceptional judgment and humanity in a moment when a child needed help. He should be celebrated, not disciplined." Local Londoners were particularly vocal in their support. Many had grown up seeing the Royal Guards as symbols of tradition and duty, but this incident added a new dimension to their perception. "We're proud of our guards," said Margaret Thompson, a retired teacher from Westminster. "This shows they're not just ceremonial figures. They're real soldiers who care about protecting people." The story reached military families and veterans who understood the significance of the guard's decision. A former Coldstream Guard, now retired, posted a lengthy message on Facebook explaining the rigorous training these soldiers undergo and how difficult it would have been to break protocol. "What this young man did took real courage," he wrote. "He put a child's safety above his own career prospects." International tourists who had witnessed the event were still sharing their experiences hours later. A couple from Germany posted a video they had taken of the moment, which quickly went viral. Their commentary, translated into English, praised both Sarah and the guard. "This is why we love visiting Britain. Even in the most formal situations, people here show such kindness." Sarah received hundreds of messages from strangers thanking her for her quick action to help Ben. Parents from around the world shared their own stories of losing track of children in crowded places and expressed gratitude that someone like her had been there when needed. "You restored my faith in humanity," wrote one mother from New Zealand. The Evening Standard published James Mitchell's interview with Sarah on their front page that evening. The headline read, "Tourist's Compassion Meets Guard's Heart at Palace." The article included quotes from witnesses and context about the guard's usual protocols, painting a complete picture of why the incident was so remarkable. Television news programs began featuring the story in their evening broadcasts. The footage that tourists had captured on their phones provided clear evidence of what had happened, showing the guard's subtle but unmistakable response to the situation. News anchors praised both Sarah and the guard for putting human needs above conventions. Royal watchers and historians weighed in on the significance of the event. "The royal guards have always been symbols of unwavering duty," explained Dr. Emily Richardson, a historian specializing in British traditions. "But this incident shows that true duty sometimes means making difficult choices to protect those who need help." Support came from unexpected places as well. Several celebrities shared the story on their social media accounts, adding their voices to the chorus of praise. A popular British actor tweeted, "This is what real heroism looks like, ordinary people doing extraordinary things when it matters most." The palace itself remained officially silent about the incident, following protocol not to comment on individual guards or specific situations. However, sources within the royal household were reported to be impressed by the guard's judgment and the positive international attention the story was generating. Tommy, who had become Sarah's unofficial companion for the day, marveled at how quickly everything had escalated. "When we were chatting this morning, did you ever imagine your day would turn out like this?" he asked. Sarah shook her head, still processing the whirlwind of attention and support. Child safety organizations began using the story to highlight the importance of community awareness and quick action in protecting vulnerable children. This incident shows how one person's alertness and another person's compassion can prevent a tragedy, said a spokesperson for a children's charity. As evening approached, Sarah realized that this single moment of human connection had created ripples that were spreading far beyond Buckingham Palace. The story had become bigger than just her actions or the guard's response. It had become a symbol of hope and humanity that people around the world needed to hear. The next morning brought news that surprised everyone following the story. Instead of facing disciplinary action, the Royal Guard was being officially commended by his commanding officers for showing exceptional judgment under unusual circumstances. The announcement came through official military channels and was quickly picked up by news organizations worldwide. Colonel Patricia Hayes, speaking on behalf of the Household Division, addressed the media outside the palace. "Our guards are trained to maintain their positions and follow protocol, but they are also soldiers sworn to protect and serve. Yesterday, one of our guardsmen demonstrated that sometimes the greatest service requires making difficult decisions in the moment." Sarah watched the press conference from her hotel room, feeling a mixture of relief and vindication. The guard would not be punished for his compassion, and the military leadership was actually praising his actions. She had worried all night that her impulsive decision to help Ben might have cost a good man his career. The guard himself, whose name was revealed to be Lance Corporal David Williams, was granted permission to speak briefly to the press. Standing, in his civilian clothes, he appeared younger than Sarah had imagined, probably in his early 20s. His nervousness was evident, but his sincerity was unmistakable. "I want to thank the lady who helped the little boy," David said, looking directly into the cameras. "She saw a child in danger and acted without thinking about herself. When I saw what was happening, I couldn't just pretend it wasn't there. These uniforms represent service to others, and sometimes that service looks different than standing perfectly still." The press conference revealed that David had been a Royal Guard for 18 months and had an exemplary service record. He came from a military family in Wales and had joined the army straight from school. His commanding officers described him as dedicated, reliable, and possessed of excellent judgment, qualities that yesterday's incident had clearly demonstrated. Sarah was invited to appear on the morning television shows via video link from her hotel. During her interview on Good Morning Britain, she was surprised to be connected live with David Williams himself. Seeing each other on screen for the first time since the incident, both seemed genuinely moved by the encounter. "Thank you for helping." "That little boy," David said to Sarah during the broadcast. "You put yourself at risk to protect someone else's child, and that took real courage." Sarah replied that she was grateful for his assistance and impressed by his willingness to break protocol when it truly mattered. The interview was watched by millions and sparked a new wave of positive responses on social media. People were touched by the genuine respect and appreciation the two showed for each other. Comments poured in praising both their actions and their humble attitudes about the attention they were receiving. Ben's parents, Linda and Mark Peterson, also appeared on television to express their gratitude publicly. They had driven down from Manchester that morning, specifically, to thank Sarah and David in person. "We can never repay what these two people did for our family," Linda said, holding Ben on her lap. "They saved our son and showed him that there are good people in the world who will help when help is needed." Little Ben himself charmed viewers by waving at the camera and saying, "Thank you, nice guard man." His innocent appreciation for David's kindness provided a perfect counterpoint to the more serious discussions about military protocol and tourist safety around royal sites. The palace announced that new procedures would be implemented to better handle emergency situations involving children or other safety concerns during ceremonial duties. Guards would receive additional training on when and how to appropriately break protocol while maintaining the dignity of their positions. The incident had prompted a constructive review of policies. Tourism officials reported a significant increase in interest in visiting Buckingham Palace, with many people specifically mentioning the compassionate guard story as motivation for their travel plans. The incident had generated positive international publicity for Britain that money couldn't buy, showing the country's traditions alongside its human values. Sarah received an invitation to visit the palace for a private tour, arranged as a gesture of appreciation for her quick thinking and positive representation of international visitors to Britain. The invitation came with a personal note thanking her for demonstrating the best qualities of tourists who visit royal sites. David Williams was offered a promotion and the opportunity to serve in a special ceremonial unit that dealt with public events and international dignitary visits. His superiors recognized that his ability to make sound decisions under pressure and his natural empathy made him ideal for representing the military in high-profile situations. The story inspired similar discussions in other countries with ceremonial guards. Military organizations worldwide began reviewing their own protocols, considering how to balance tradition with practical responses to emergency situations. Sarah and David's experience had started conversations that extended far beyond Britain. Educational institutions began using the incident as a case study in ethics classes, exploring themes of duty, compassion, and moral courage. The story provided a perfect example of how individuals can navigate conflicting obligations and choose actions that serve the greater good while maintaining respect for institutional roles. A children's book publisher reached out to Sarah about turning the story into an illustrated book for young readers, focusing on themes of helping others and the importance of community awareness. Sarah was intrigued by the possibility of reaching children with a message about kindness and responsibility. As the day progressed, Sarah reflected on how a simple tourist visit had evolved into something much more significant. She had come to London to see famous sights and take photos, but instead, she had participated in a moment that was touching people around the world and prompting positive changes in long-standing traditions. 6 months after the incident at Buckingham Palace, the ripple effects continued to spread in ways that none of the participants could have predicted. Sarah returned to her job as an elementary school teacher in California with a story that captivated her students and colleagues, but more importantly, with a new perspective on how small acts of kindness can create meaningful change. The children's book about her experience, titled The Guard Who Cared, became a bestseller in multiple countries. Sarah had worked closely with the publisher and illustrator to ensure the story emphasized the right messages about helping others and breaking down barriers between people. All of her proceeds from the book went to children's safety organizations in Britain and the United States. David Williams had indeed accepted the promotion and was now serving as a liaison between the military and various charitable organizations. His role involved making public appearances at schools and community events, sharing his story, and encouraging young people to consider careers in service. He had become an unexpected but effective spokesperson for the values of duty and compassion. The friendship that developed between Sarah and David surprised them both. They maintained regular contact through email and video calls, sharing updates about their lives and the ongoing effects of their famous moment together. David had visited Sarah in California during his leave, and she had returned to London twice more, each time meeting with him away from the tourist crowds. Ben Peterson, now 5 years old, had become something of a local celebrity in Manchester. His parents reported that he often played Royal Guard with his friends, but his version of the game always included helping people who needed assistance. The incident had clearly made a lasting impression on him about the importance of kindness and community support. The procedures implemented at royal sites following the incident had been refined and adopted by similar ceremonial units in other Commonwealth countries. The Buckingham Protocol, as it became informally known, provided guidelines for guards to respond appropriately to emergency situations without compromising the dignity of their ceremonial roles. Tommy, Sarah's Irish companion from that memorable day, had become a successful travel blogger partly due to his first-hand account of the famous incident. His blog post about the experience had gone viral, and he now specialized in writing about meaningful travel encounters that went beyond typical tourist experiences. He and Sarah remained friends and often shared stories about how that single day had changed both their lives. The tourism industry had embraced the story as an example of how authentic human moments could be more valuable than any marketing campaign. Visit Britain, the country's tourism board, had created a campaign around the theme of Real Experiences, Real People, featuring the story alongside other examples of British hospitality and human connection. Sarah's school had incorporated her experience into their curriculum about global citizenship and community responsibility. Her students wrote letters to David and other royal guards, learning about different cultures while practicing their writing skills. The guards' responses had been educational and inspiring, creating an ongoing pen-pal relationship that enriched both sides. The psychological impact on Sarah had been profound but entirely positive. She had always been somewhat shy and hesitant to get involved in situations that might draw attention to herself. The experience had shown her that taking action when others need help was not only the right thing to do, but could create positive outcomes far beyond the immediate situation. David's military career had flourished in ways that went beyond his promotion. He had been selected to represent Britain at international military ceremonies and had spoken at conferences about leadership and moral courage. His superiors noted that the incident had revealed leadership qualities that might have remained hidden in traditional military roles. The story had become part of the official lore surrounding Buckingham Palace. Tour guides regularly shared the tale with visitors, using it to illustrate how the seemingly stoic guards were real people capable of compassion and quick thinking. It had humanized the ceremonial positions in a way that enhanced rather than diminished their mystique. Academic researchers had studied the incident as an example of how social media could amplify positive stories and create constructive social change. The rapid spread of support for David and praise for Sarah demonstrated how digital platforms could be used to celebrate human goodness, rather than just controversy and conflict. A documentary filmmaker had approached both Sarah and David about creating a longer-form exploration of their story and its aftermath. They were considering the proposal, intrigued by the possibility of using their experience to inspire others, but cautious about maintaining their privacy and the authenticity of their message. The annual reunion that Sarah, David, and the Peterson family had established became a highlight of each year. They met at Buckingham Palace every August, the anniversary of their first meeting, to catch up and reflect on how their lives had been shaped by that single moment of human connection and mutual support. Local schools in both Britain and America had begun teaching about the incident as part of lessons on citizenship and character development. Teachers used the story to discuss concepts like moral courage, the importance of helping others, and how individual actions could create positive change in communities and beyond. Sarah often thought about her grandmother while reflecting on the experience. She felt certain that her grandmother would have been proud of her actions and amazed by the positive outcomes. The blue dress she had worn that day now hung in a place of honor in her closet, a reminder of how an ordinary day could become extraordinary through simple human kindness. As Sarah prepared for her third return trip to London, she marveled at how much her life had changed since that morning when she had simply wanted to see the famous guards and take some tourist photos. Instead, she had discovered that the most meaningful travel experiences come not from seeing famous sights, but from connecting with other people and being willing to step forward when someone needs help. The story of the tourist who embraced a moment of crisis and the royal guard who chose compassion over protocol had become more than just a heartwarming news story. It had evolved into a lasting reminder that in a world often focused on division and conflict, simple acts of human kindness still had the power to bring people together and inspire positive change across cultures and continents.